All right. So, welcome. My name is Jessie Haas. I am the National Director of the Therapy Animal Program for Pet Partners. We really want to thank you for dedicating this hour to Pet Partners today. Before we go any further, I would love to have my two colleagues quickly introduce themselves. Katie, you can go first. There you go, Katie. My fault.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the Volunteer Experience Manager at Pet Partners. I manage the Therapy Animal Program team. So if you've reached out to us using our Contact Us form, you've likely contacted my team. So I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, and hi, I'm Brenna Morgan. I'm the Philanthropy Manager at Pet Partners, and I manage all aspects of our fundraising activities, including events like the World's Largest Pet Walk.
Great. Thanks to both of you for being here today and helping me out with this. I just want to go through a couple of elements of this agenda. You are welcome to go ahead and read what's there. The first two things I do want to talk about right now. And the first is that this is a webinar and you will be muted the entire time because we have right now about 290 people on this webinar. So that helps us reduce background noise and all of that good stuff. However, we do want to engage with you. So I believe at 3 different points during this webinar, I will launch a 1-question survey, like 3 separate single question surveys, where you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're approaching this entire situation in terms of returning to visiting. Additionally, we've left a really healthy chunk of time at the end of the session for questions and answers, because we know there's a lot of people on this call. We probably won't get to every question, but we will try to get to those that seem to be repeating if multiple people have asked a similar question. If you look at your GoToWebinar dashboard, you'll see a place that you can enter questions. For the most part, we're going to be keeping those till the end, but you are free to enter them as you think of them. Second up on the screen is that I just want to share with you a little bit about Pet Partners' overall approach and philosophy to visiting during the pandemic. And as many of you know, prior to COVID, if COVID never had existed, we have always been very supportive of each individual volunteer's decisions and choices about their volunteerism. As long as you're operating within our policies and procedures, our volunteers can visit when they want, how frequently they want, where they want. And that kind of power of personal decision is still how we're approaching visiting during the pandemic. So if you're somebody who is already visiting, we support that for the most part. If you're somebody who's saying, I'm not going to visit for many months to come, that's okay too. We support any of those choices. I do want to just give this caveat during this overall approach and philosophy, which is to say that you want to make sure that you're considering yourself and your own personal situations, what your health situation is, what the health situation of the people you live with might be. Of course, you want to consider the health situation of the client or the patient you may be visiting, but you also want to consider your community and doing what's right for the community. And being mindful of where you are geographically, what the infection rates might be, community spread. So as you're making these personal decisions we empower you to make, you also need to be thinking about the client and thinking about the greater good, because we're all in this together. So I think I will leave it at that. I am going to turn off my own camera because I know it can be a little distracting to, watch faces and read slides. I think Katie and Brenna are also going to turn theirs off. We just thought it might be nice to have some faces and faces with voices. So with that said, the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is answer a few of those polls that I mentioned just a moment ago. I'm going to launch the first one on your screen. It should say, what is your relationship with Pet Partners? And no, not everybody will necessarily fit into this category. One of these categories listed here. So I'm sorry if it doesn't totally apply to everybody, but we'd like to get a sense of who's on this call. And you can select more than one answer, by the way, because I know some folks are a little bit of both. or 2 categories, maybe even 3, some of you. Great. I'm gonna give another 5 to 10 seconds to let people vote. All right, so it's looking like the majority of participants on this call are current handlers, which is great because the way that Brenna and Katie and I are going to be presenting some of the information will certainly kind of be from that lens of a current handler. Having said that, there is a lot of information here that is very applicable to those of you. It looks like about 8% of you are prospective volunteers, so you're considering joining Pet Partners. Lots of this information is going to be helpful to you because, you know, this pandemic isn't going away tomorrow. So if you join us this summer or fall, these are still things you're going to have to consider and think about. And I do want to welcome the 10% of you who are representatives from a facility that receives Pet Partners teams. So we got 85% current handlers, 25% of you are current volunteer leaders, excuse me, 8% are prospective volunteers, and 10% are from facilities. So that's great. I'm going to close that poll. I have one other poll I want to launch as we get started here, just to give Katie and Brenna and I a sense of where people are at. And I'm launching it now. And the question is, have you returned to visiting? I'm curious how many yeses, how many nos, and of course we know there are some of you on the call who are not registered volunteers, so that's understandable that you would not be visiting. Give it another 5 seconds to let people find it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. In terms of the results, about 10% of you have returned to visiting, excuse me, about 85% of you haven't. And then of course, there's a few folks who just aren't registered and therefore, of course, not visiting. Those numbers don't surprise me at all. We knew that there were a few people beginning to inch back into visiting, but most were not. When Katie and Brenna and I decided to schedule this webinar, this was a number of weeks ago when things were looking a little bit more promising, and then we've had spikes in a number of large metropolitan areas. So I'm not surprised to see this. So with that said, Katie, I'm actually going to turn over to Katie, who's going to talk about some guidance from Pet Partners, and she's going to talk a little bit about the CDC as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessie. So we're going to be reviewing visiting standards and protocols. So I'm going to start by going over grooming guidelines, and then we will discuss infection prevention topics. So with grooming, Pet Partners policy is that the animal should be bathed within 24 hours of the visit and kept clean until then. It is acceptable to give a sponge bath or use cleaning wipes or animal dry shampoo immediately prior to the visit. We do understand that if you visit frequently, it might be impractical or harmful to the animal to be bathed before each visit. So animals, as a general rule, should always be clean smelling with a clean coat, free of debris for any visit. Into the specifics with the grooming. So for the coat, it needs to be free of knots, snags, and debris. For animals such as horses or alpacas, the coat should be clipped or shaved. For rats, extra attention should be paid to the tail just to ensure that that's clean. For nails, hooves, and feet, the animal's nails must be clipped to a safe length so that they aren't sharp or hooked. They should not pose a danger to the people that you visit or catch on clothing or interfere with the animal's ability to walk on various surfaces. So just want to make sure that any rough edges have been filed and that they're safe for visiting. With the breath, you want to make sure that your animal's breath is as agreeable as possible. Obviously, you can only do so much, but you can use toothpaste or oral rinses that are specifically made for your species if that's an option. Also, another suggestion that we have is if your animal's breath is bad as a result of eating strong food, so strong smelling food, one option is to consider switching to a premium pet food. So premium pet foods usually have a more agreeable odor. That can make a significant difference. We've got information about drooling. So some breeds of dogs are definitely prone to drooling or slobbering. If you're visiting with an animal that drools excessively, you can carry a hand towel so you can occasionally wipe the animal's mouth to prevent clients from being drooled on. And this also is a form of infection control. So you'll want to use hand sanitizer in between when you do that. For the eyes, normal drainage from the eyes must be clean. And then the last one is ears. Ears need to be clean and free of odor. So those are just some high-level reminders about grooming and bathing. Next, for hand sanitation. So hand hygiene is a general term that we use that applies to hand washing with soap and water, antiseptic hand wash, and alcohol-based hand sanitizers. Clean hands are the single most important factor in preventing the spread of pathogens and antibiotic resistance in healthcare settings. So clean hands are very important. Good hand hygiene protects you, the animal, and the client that you're visiting from unwanted germs. So we really emphasize hand sanitation here. During the visit, as most of you know, you're required to wash your hands or use hand sanitizer before and after visiting each client. You should ask anyone who wants to touch your pet to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer first. And you and both the clients should also wash the hands or use hand sanitizer at the end of the visit. So continuing the hand sanitization, it was important before, but it's especially important now that you are doing that as much as possible. I've got some tips for hand hygiene, which are important. So when using hand sanitizer, apply the product to the palm of one hand and then rub your hands together, covering all surfaces of both hands and fingers until your hands are dry. So that's an option if you're using the hand sanitizer. When you're washing your hands with soap and water, you want to start by wetting both hands with water. Apply the amount of soap that's recommended by the manufacturer, and then rub your hands together for at least 15 seconds, covering all surfaces of both the hands and the fingers. Rinse your hands with water, and then you want to leave the water running while you dry your hands thoroughly with a disposable towel, and then use the towel to turn off the faucet. So being as mindful as possible that you're not touching anything in between the drying. And then the key to effective hand hygiene is friction. So whether you are using soap and water or hand sanitizer, you want to rub your hands together vigorously. So hand sanitation. In general, Pet Partners recommends hand sanitizer because hand sanitizer provides several advantages over hand washing with soap in a visit environment specifically. So some of those reasons: number one, hand sanitizer is more accessible than a sink on a visit. You can take a small bottle of water or a small bottle of hand sanitizer with you wherever you go. So much more convenient. It requires less time. And clients with limited mobility can be offered hand sanitizer wherever they're at. So you don't have to move to a sink to perform proper hand hygiene, which when you're visiting in certain facilities, that can be very important. One recommendation we have, which I think is helpful, is planning ahead of time, how, especially now, how you will ask people who you interact with to perform the proper hand hygiene. So by having an easy explanation, you will get your visit off on the right foot. It's often helpful to explain to people that good hand hygiene is important not only for their protection, but also for yours and the animals. So finally, with this slide, lots of information, but finally for this slide, I wanted to give a call out to our infection prevention and control course, which is free for existing handlers. The online course is designed to promote safe therapy animal visits through increased awareness of infection prevention and control. So this course is designed to meet the requirements published in 2015 by the Society for Healthcare Epidemiology of America, which is called SHEA. The course covers zoonotic diseases as well as training on standard precautions, including hand hygiene and self-screening for human symptoms. This course has been reviewed by members of SHEA, which is that organization above, the CDC, and leading veterinarians. The content is appropriate for all therapy animal handlers, both new and existing, as well as facility staff and volunteer coordinators. So this has been around, but now more than ever, if you haven't taken the course or if you want a refresher, it's a good time to do that. Okay. So now we're going to get into new recommendations. So that's what we've had in place already, but with these new recommendations, we've got some things to go over. So while we might not have updated our policy to require masks because there may be situations where it's not appropriate, we do recommend that you wear them, especially indoors. The majority of facilities are likely to require this as well, so be sure to check with them prior to your first visits. Something to remember though, animals should never wear masks, so this is for humans only. Gloves are not recommended by the CDC, and pet partners, since we do require hand sanitization, which is not possible with the gloves, gloves should probably be avoided. So far though, we've talked mostly about infection prevention. There are 4 additional things to consider when returning to visiting after a hiatus. So this is what we're going to talk about of easing into the visiting after a hiatus. So the first thing that you'll want to consider when you get back into visiting is scheduling your first visit to be a little bit shorter than you may have traditionally visited for in the past. As much as you or your animal might have been missing therapy animal visits, which we know that so many of you have, these are inherently stressful at times, especially now. So at least what you can do is schedule for a little bit shorter while you get the feel for things again. You also don't know yet what the facility is going to look like and feel like, which may be different than before COVID-19. So one way to do this is to ease into visiting with shorter visits. The second consideration, and we've gotten this feedback, especially or questions about mask wearing. So the second consideration, since mask wearing is likely to be prevalent no matter where you visit, you'll want to spend some time getting your animal used to mask wearing. While your pet may see you or your family members in a mask, seeing strangers approach in a mask can be an entirely different situation for some animals. So one idea is to bring your animal to places others might be seen in masks, such as your local hardware store if pets are allowed right now, or pet-friendly patios that have dining situations. Petco or PetSmart are also options that you can do. You can even spend some time walking around a retail parking lot where people will likely have masks on as they prepare to enter or just exit a store. So some different ideas in there to get your animal used to having masks around them. The third consideration is while we understand that some people must attend gatherings such as weddings or funerals, we urge volunteers to avoid visiting for at least 14 days after such activity, regardless of whether or not there is known exposure or symptoms. So this ties to especially what Jesse talked about at the beginning, is really being thoughtful about not just only your circumstance, but when you go into that facility, you're going to be impacting other people. So the fourth and final consideration also relates to this third one, and that's we're recommending thinking about the interactions that you're having in your daily life and what risks you're taking in those circumstances before you decide to return to visiting. So if you are somebody who has returned to work in a busy office, for example, you might want to reconsider certain types of therapy animal visits that bring you in close contact with others. If you've knowingly been exposed to somebody with a confirmed or suspected case of COVID-19, you should definitely not be visiting. Whereas if you're somebody who's working at home maybe and is careful about social distancing, that might make you a better candidate to start visiting again, as long as you practice mitigating actions like wearing your mask, abundant hand sanitization. As we've said, though, we support our volunteers to make decisions based on their own personal situation, but you shouldn't limit your consideration to just yourself. So again, touching on this subject, please also think carefully whether you've lowered your exposure enough for a return to be safe and possible. For some volunteers, visiting with their animals, even on a limited basis, is a priority, so they'll be willing to be more cautious at work or stores or social situations in order to make visiting a possibility. So that is when visiting makes the most sense. Okay. So reviewing our guidelines, I just threw out a bunch of information, which is helpful, but you may want to go back and look at it. So you can review our guidance and protocol in writing simply by logging into the Volunteer Center on petpartners.org. So log into the Volunteer Center account On the home screen, you'll see a pink bar that you can click on, and it will take you to a resource page that not only contains information that we just described, but it'll also provide additional resources, including a document you can provide to the facility when you do decide to return to visiting. So it's got really good resources in there, and not just only resources for you, but resources for a facility as well.
Katie, before I advance to the next slide, I just want to mention something about this, which is if you have a volunteer, you can have a volunteer center account even if you're not a prospective or existing volunteer. And this information is accessible to anybody with an account. So if you want to read it, just create an account and it'll be there. It's not only for people who are visiting right now or current handlers. So I just want to make that clear.
Yep, very important. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with the CDC on this topic specifically. So as you can see from the side, the CDC does have a page on their website that covers guidance for handlers of service and therapy animals. The CDC's guidelines do match up with ours completely. So we have not had to make any adjustments to our standard protocol other than the recommendation for masks. For example, the CDC highlights hand sanitization and regular bathing. The CDC does call out that you might want to be more mindful, though, about any extra items you carry with you. I know people sometimes carry toys, and perhaps avoiding those if they aren't truly necessary. So that's something that's a little different. But overall, our guidelines line up exactly with the CDC. The CDC does call out, and we agree, that you need to be following local authorities' suggestions on social distancing and mask wearing. So monitoring the level of transmission in your area and assessing your own personal risk, it's gonna look different for everybody. So that's important to acknowledge again too, that it will look different based on where you're located. Okay, I'm gonna hand it back off to Jessie to cover alternative visiting options.
Thank you, Katie. And we are more than halfway through, folks, and I know tons of questions are coming in. So since we are as far along as we are, we will get to those questions, or at least a big chunk of them. Let me just pull up my notes here real quick. Sorry, I have the question box up too. There we go. Okay, so I want to talk about some ways that you can visit that might look different than a typical therapy animal visit, which for those of you who are normally out visiting, you know that they're often indoors and they can include lots of interactions with many people within an hour or two. And so these are kind of some sort of deviation from that. I have the different options listed on the screen and I want to talk briefly about each. So you or the facility might be open to outdoor socially distanced visits. Even if you're not doing it now and you feel comfortable with it and it's the right or acceptable thing to do in your area, we do encourage you to ask facilities what they might think about this. We do know there are some teams have visited in the courtyard or yard space of a facility or walked their animals nearby to residents or patients in kind of like a parade style format without any direct interaction. So I know that many of you on a normal visit maybe sitting in a courtyard of, say, an assisted living facility, but you're interacting directly with those residents in that situation. This is a little bit different in the sense that there is no direct interaction. There's no petting of the animal, but you are in their environment. If it's possible, you might wish to do a walk with me visit, which involves having someone walk along with you and your animal. And again, this can be done outdoors, and it can be done in a socially distanced way if you so choose from one another. Walk with Me is a special initiative from Pet Partners. It's similar in the sense that it's also an initiative like Read With Me for those of you who participate in Read With Me. So Walk With Me initiative has its own supporting materials and guidance to help you as a handler make these visits more effective. So if you want to find out more about those, log into the Volunteer Center account and you can search by Walk With Me and you'll see some of that information there. If your facility doesn't want visits to take place outside for any reason, meaning the client or patient or resident wouldn't come outside, you can sometimes visit at a window to provide at least some visual interaction. I'll show you a photo of this in a moment, as you can get pretty creative with this. Some of our handlers already have. It helps to have a plan so that window visiting is more engaging. Plan to have your animal maybe perform a trick or play with a toy. Signs can be helpful during window visits. I do just want to circle back to something Katie said about reducing additional items being brought on your visits for infection control reasons. In this case, since you're outside, toys would be more acceptable than, say, if you're inside and having other people touch those toys. So I just want to make that distinction clear. A really easy way to maintain connection with facilities is through written letters or the sending of photographs of your animal in the mail. I do know, and I think one of the volunteers who organized this is actually on the call today. One group in Texas organized letter writing campaigns to the local fire stations, I believe, where their animals had visited, and they kind of divided it up, and certain teams sent photos to certain stations. And it was just a way to maintain that connection when you just can't get near a facility. Mail has now been determined to be very low risk in terms of transmission. So my guess is most facilities will feel pretty comfortable with this. Obviously, it's also possible to facilitate this type of connection via email and with attached digital photos as well. So you can go old school or new school, whatever makes you feel most comfortable. A final option I want to share is getting involved with virtual visits. So virtual visits can occur live and in real time using a service like Zoom, Skype, or FaceTime, or even kind of what Katie and Brenna and I did earlier. We had our cameras right up on screen. You can use a service like this. There's a whole bunch of options out there. And that's a situation where you and your animal are on one end of the computer, and a client or patient or a group of them are on the other end, and you're actually talking to each other live. In addition, we did create a Facebook group. The URL is on the screen there. You can also just search for Therapy Animal Visits with Pet Partners. In this group, handlers are invited to share engaging content directly to the feed. Meanwhile, the facilities who have joined that group are able to use that content. They can show the videos to their residents, or they can print off animal-related activity or art sheets that handlers have gotten creative with and that they've uploaded to the group. So it's really like a curated space for handlers to share their animals and for facilities to kind of receive that gift, really, and share it with residents or clients or students or whatever. And this is not live. So if you're just really not feeling that idea of getting on Zoom and doing it live and keeping your animal engaged, totally understandable. Some people are going to be great at that. Some of are going to find that more difficult. The Facebook group is a way to do it where you can kind of record it. You can do a few different tries and then share it when you feel comfortable. I do have some fun photos of all of these things to share with you, so you can kind of get a sense of what these look like. On the left here with this cat, this is I can tell it's a Zoom service that's being used. So the cat is actually on a live Zoom call. Obviously, we have somebody in the middle there doing an outdoor walking type visit. And then on the right is an example of a window visit. And you can notice here that there's a couple of things that this handler has done a really good job of. She brought a stool so that her dog could reach the window. She brought a cute little sign there. It looks like the animal has a toy. I've seen people get really creative with what their signs have. Sometimes they have quizzes, or my name is, or make me do a trick, so that residents can then hold up a sign saying, I want the dog to roll over or shake hands or whatever. So you can make these really interactive. Again, I would encourage you to consider asking your facilities, especially those that you already have a relationship with during normal visiting, if they'd be open to any of this. Some of them may not even have thought of this. And they can never replace in-person visits. We know that. But for many people, especially in congregate living settings, they have been in near total isolation for months and months. Any type of connection like this will likely be at least considered, even if it can't be implemented, so that that isolation can be reduced. I've got a couple more photos here. So this comes from a Pet Partners community partner in Las Vegas. You can see on the right here is like a little thing that they mailed out to one of their facilities. On the left is a really neat word search they put together with all of the names of the animals in their group, and then they had to word search and find them. I believe they mailed that out. They may have shared it electronically, I'm not sure. But that just goes to show you can keep things relatively low tech. So if you're crafty or artsy, there are some things you can do as well. I have another poll I want to launch on the screen, so watch for that. 1 second while I get it up here. And this one says, are you interested in participating in any alternative visits? So I'm just curious which of these might be something you're interested in. And maybe you've already done them, and that's fine. You can select it. So if you've already done window visits, select yes, I'm interested in window visits. You can select more than one as well. I'm going to give people a little while longer on this one. Only about 40% of people have finished entering their answers. So I want to give this a little longer to let people give their input. All right, I'm going to close this poll. And what I didn't realize is I can actually share with you all the results on the screen, I think. I'm sorry I didn't do that earlier for the other polls. I didn't realize I had the option to do that. So you can see what folks are interested in doing. I'm happy to see folks willing to consider these. I also understand that they're not for everybody. Yeah. All right. I am now turning it over to Brenna, who's going to kind of piggyback on what I just talked about with walking visits and talk about one of our signature Pet Partners events. Go ahead, Brenna.
Great, thank you so much. And it's particularly timely considering 65% of you say you're interested in walking visits. That is wonderful. So I'm going to be chatting with you today about the world's largest pet walk, which is one of our national fundraising and awareness events. This event promotes the health and wellness benefits of walking with pets while also educating the general public on therapy animals and raising critical funds for pet partners. So the 2020 World's Largest Pet Walk will be held virtually on September 26th, with participants around the world taking a walk with their pet in their community. We're encouraging our walkers to participate in any location and setting that feels comfortable for them. In the past, we've had amazing virtual turnout. So even before COVID-19, we were doing this event almost totally virtually. And we had walkers participate all around the United States and in international locations like Argentina, Romania, Colombia, and many more. So that's wonderful. And I'm guessing some of you have participated in the World's Largest Pet Walk before. And if so, you'll remember that this is a really customizable event. You can really do what's comfortable for you, what's interesting for you, what's exciting for you. Yeah, you can really choose what kind of walk activity suits you. The main goal overall is to raise awareness and funds for pet partners on that day, but you can definitely fundraise and go on your walk anytime between now and September 26th. And I also wanted to note that you can also register to support one of the local Pet Partners chapters, like Pet Partners of Southern California or Pet Partners of Arizona. So since there isn't one single location that the walk is held in, the world's largest pet walk really seamlessly translates to the social distancing protocols that we've been talking about today. This will allow you to safely participate in the walk while also still educating your community on the benefits of walking with pets. And I also wanted to just note that fundraising events like the World's Largest Pet Walk are critical to Pet Partners' operations. As many of you know, since you're current handlers, we made the necessary decision to extend all therapy animal team registrations by year. And when we did this, we did so knowing that this would lead to a $110,000 registration fee shortfall for 2020. So the funds raised during the World's Largest Pet Walk will really help us make up that shortfall. So we're hoping to get some strong participation this year. Okay, and so then on this page, I've outlined some ideas for how you can safely participate in the World's Largest Pet Walk during COVID-19. Please always remember to follow your local guidelines and requirements for distancing. Obviously, it varies by place to place. So like Jesse and Katie mentioned, window-to-window visits are a wonderful way to connect with the facilities and individuals you previously visited. I would suggest you could organize a World's Largest Pet Walk event to walk around a facility building so you could greet those you previously visited. You could also walk from one facility location to another. For example, I know many Ronald McDonald houses are close to a hospital because that's the whole point of their organization. So you could walk from the hospital to the Ronald McDonald house and visit people along the way. During your walk, you could post on social media so your supporters could go on the journey with you. And this will help them really understand the incredible impact you and your therapy animal have on those you visit. I do want to note that we should be sure not to post patient photos or information on social media, but instead just tell us stories of their reaction when you went to their window. I know it's really special for so many people to see a therapy animal that they miss dearly. So just even explaining that reaction on social media while posting the link to your personal fundraising page will be really impactful. Another option is to explore options for hikes in your area. This is a great idea because hiking trails are a really easy place to socially distance, and your pets also love to go exploring in the great outdoors for the most part. You could treat this more like a traditional fundraising walk or run that you might have participated in the past, and have your supporters pledge per mile. For example, you could ask that they donate $10 for each mile you hike. I personally think this is how I'm going to be participating this year with my pets. So I think it's a good option. And one handler even told me she was going to be going on like this big long distance backpacking trip with her pet, and she was going to be posting updates on social media with links to her site. And so obviously that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but think about what activities you love to do outside and how you and your pet can adapt these to support the world's largest pet walk. And I think you'll notice with everything I've been mentioning, the social component, social media specifically component is really helpful in terms of both raising awareness and raising money. Just by hashtagging, hashtag pet partners, hashtag world's largest pet walk, you really are raising awareness on all your social media platforms. And finally, my other suggestion was going to be going for a socially distanced walk. So as a part of your fundraising strategy, you could ask your supporters to donate to your page so then they could go on a socially distanced walk with you and your therapy animal. I think that'd be really exciting for people who have never met a therapy animal before. So you can invite your supporters to meet you at a park or a neighborhood, and you can then print off walk bibs. We have these really cute walk bibs. You could have probably seen it on the photo on the slide before. I'm sorry about that, but you could print those off or ask them to print them off for you, and you can provide them so you could all write your names and they could say, oh, I'm walking with your pet, etc. And then during your walk, I would suggest that you tell them a little bit about what you usually do as a therapy animal team with pet partners. That helps them know what their donation is supporting and why the work of therapy animals is so very important, especially during this time. So if you are interested in registering, and I hope you are, you can register by visiting the link on the screen, worldslargestpetwalk.org. And there you can set up your registration and begin planning your walk activity. We have tons of resources on the website like printables, templates. We have information on fundraising incentives. We have different fundraising goals, like if you raise $50, you get a pet bandana. If you raise 100, you get a t-shirt that matches, so you can match your pet during the walk. So all that information is available on that website, and we'll be pushing out more information up until the walk on this as well. So I hope you'll join us. And since I work in the development department, I don't get a lot of chance to talk to our volunteers. So I just wanted to quickly say thank you so much for all you do. I'm really proud to work with Pet Partners because of the amazing work you do.
Me too, Brenna. Thank you for saying that. We now have the balance of the hour, so about 20 minutes for questions. I do encourage you to send them in using your dashboard. Oftentimes, participants on these webinars have really good questions that we maybe didn't consider including in the content, but are still really important. So go ahead and type those in. Just bear with me because there's a lot here. So I need a chance to just kind of glance through them. A couple people asked if we can provide info on how to get to the infection prevention and control course that Katie mentioned, which is free for all existing volunteers. And now is a great time to take that course. And I'll answer this question in just a second, but I do want to point out that infection prevention and control has always been really important to your volunteerism. COVID isn't obviously the first virus that can cause major issue, although of course this is a whole other scale. So I'm really hoping that people avail themselves of it now, and then it'll be information they can use in the future. What I can do to make it easiest is when I do a follow-up with everybody, which will include this recording. I know there were some people who wanted to forward this to other teams, a recording, and that's totally fine. You're welcome to do that. I will also include instructions on how to access that course. That might be the easiest way to do that. All right. Whoa, there's a lot here. Somebody asked if they need to have a Facebook account in order to participate in that Facebook group that I mentioned. I have never really considered this, but my first thought is you can't really participate because you have to have a Facebook account in order to upload things, in order to join the group and actually upload content of you and your animal. And it is a private group. So if you don't have an account, I can't let you into the group. We just didn't want it to be tons and tons of members of the general public necessarily. Having said that, if you have like a great video that you just want to make available for people, you can email me. You'll see my email in the follow-up, and I'm happy to upload it and give you and your animal credit there. I'm not sure if that's exactly what that person was looking for, but I can upload on your behalf. I'd be happy to do that. Okay, so this is a great question. Katie, just to give a different voice, I'm going to let you answer this. If you want to kick it back to me, that's fine as well. This person is essentially asking, how can face-to-face visits look different for everybody depending on where you're located? In the sense that how can they look different if everybody's following CDC social distance guidelines? And this question really kind of focuses on the fact that as handlers, you don't want to get too far away from your animal because that's not suggested, right? You always want to stay in close proximity to your animal, but you also can't necessarily extend the leash. So she's kind of asking, how are we balancing those two things? Do you want to answer that, or would you rather I tackle it?
I can take a stab, and if you have more to add,
okay,
we can do it at the end. I would say you're right. I mean, for the most part, or you want to make sure that you are following CDC guidelines. I would say where it comes in location based, probably will have to do, off the top of my head, I would think with facility preference too. If places are reopening, facilities may be more comfortable even having people visit inside and doing those visits. So you'll have the face masks and the hand sanitizer, but you'll be able to do more of those inside visits in locations where things may not be opening yet or COVID is increasing. You may need to be doing more outside visits, window visits, things like that. So I think it's a conversation with the facility and with yourself based on what's happening in your area, kind of how you want to set up that visit. But the basics of keeping yourself safe and infection prevention with the mask or the hand sanitizer, hand washing, social distance 6 feet, that will be consistent.
So
Justine?
yeah, I want to add a little bit to that. And actually the CDC webpage that Katie screenshotted and had up before, they actually acknowledge the fact that in a therapy animal visitation or in obviously an assistance animal situation as well, potentially, sometimes that 6-foot rule can apply. You will come within 6 feet of other people if you're doing a therapy animal visit. However, when you're not actually having an interaction, you should be able to maintain that 6 feet distance. So when we say maintain the 6 feet, it means as much as is possible. And certainly you can sit a little farther apart from a client. I mean, there are things you can do to create more distance, but if you are going to visit in person, there needs to be some acknowledgement that that 6 feet is not going to be maintained 100% of the time. And even the CDC acknowledges that, which is why we recommend masks, just as the CDC does. When social distancing can't be guaranteed, that's where masks come in. That's why we recommend maybe additional hand sanitizing, all of that stuff. So we're trying to layer here. But Katie's right in the sense that if you are in a high infection area where you really don't want to be getting indoors 6 feet close to somebody because the positivity rate in your area is so high, then maybe it's time not to visit or visit outdoors in those situations or visit at windows. So it's kind of a cascade of different choices. I hope we answered that well enough. Somebody asked a question about portable sinks here, and I don't have any information on that. So I'm going to unfortunately have to pass on that one. I'm sorry to the asker. Somebody gave a good suggestion here about using hand sanitizer. I want to just share it. It is best to do your hands first, then put the sanitizer on the client's hands versus the other direction. I can see why that would potentially decrease cross-contamination. Okay, somebody asked here, what do you feel about vests and bandanas with multiple people touching them on a visit? Should pets go without for now? We don't require that Pet Partners therapy animals wear a vest or a bandana. So if you are most comfortable just taking all variables out of this situation, then absolutely don't have them wear it if you don't want them to during this time. We like when they wear them in normal times. Of course, we want people to know that they're pet partners and you're pet partners and you have that gold standard behind you. But we certainly understand in this situation if you don't want to and you're not required to. I don't have the CDC information directly in front of me right now, but if you take a look at the CDC, they have talked a lot about the surface contact transmission being lower on the scale than maybe originally thought. So you might want to dig into that too before you make the decision. And of course, if you are going to have your animal wear a vest, you're going to want to be really careful about having them wash it, as if your rabbit can do laundry. You're going to want to be careful about washing that between visits if you're going frequently to different places. Somebody asked about using an 8-foot leash. No, you still need to use a 6-foot leash. And a lot of that has to do with the importance. I mean, safety and health is important. And part of that is COVID, but part of it is the fact that you and your animal and the client are safer if the animal is closer to you. So we don't want to like trade off one safety measure just for another one. So you still need to have your animal on a 6-foot leash. If you really want more distance between you and the other person, then we suggest, of course, that you just don't have as much interaction. You sit farther apart and you make it more of a conversation and more of a visual interaction between your animal and the client if you don't feel comfortable using that 6-foot leash. Do you have specific recommendations for working with groups of children in schools? I'm actually going to tie this up with another question I got, which was, what do we recommend for people who are ready to visit but their facilities aren't? I was actually going to say to that person that something I've heard quite a bit of is therapy animal handlers working with summer camps for kids where they're keeping the kids in, like 5 or 6 child pods, and they're outdoors and the kids are distanced, and they're inviting the therapy animal teams to come in, and there isn't necessarily direct interaction, but it's an opportunity maybe for the handler to teach the child or the children about, animal care or canine body language or whatever it might be. So first of all, I want to say that might be an interesting option to kind of look and maybe approach some folks about that type of visiting. And then in terms of working with groups of children in schools for outdoor visits, same thing. I would say use it as an educational opportunity. Come with content that you as the human are sharing about your animal and make it less about the direct interaction necessarily if that's not comfortable to the school or to you or to anybody else. Although I will say that right now we're also unsure about what's going to happen in schools in the fall anyway, that we're not really prepared to answer that. Maybe as more information comes out from the various departments of education, we might be able to give some more guidance on that. Still a lot. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll. Any suggestions for reading in a library? I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's sort of the same thing. If your library is allowing folks to be indoors and do reading visits, and you have done all the assessments that we've talked about before in terms of yourself and the community and what's going on there, you could do a reading visit potentially more distanced. Again, that means not as much interaction directly between the reader and your dog. But a child can be motivated just by the presence of an animal as well. So perhaps you can just put more distance between yourselves if you want, or that makes people feel more comfortable. I also would say you could potentially limit the number of children allowed that day because, like I said, I think in certain places it's very different to go into a therapy animal visit and just visit with 1 or 2 clients versus going into a therapy animal visit and visiting with 20 clients over the course of an hour or 2, right? So maybe the same with reading visits where it's capped at a certain number of children that day. I hope I'm answering that question correctly. Ooh, Katie, here's one for you. Can you talk a little bit about logging virtual visits on our site and in people's accounts if they've been doing those and what that looks like?
Yeah, yes, definitely. So to the question of can you log virtual visits? Yes, you can definitely log virtual visits. The key when doing it is you want to put the facility address. So if you are doing maybe like a Skype video session, you don't want to put your home address. You want to put the address of the facility that you're virtually visiting at. Even if I actually got an email about this today, even if you're, sending them letters or different things like that, you still want to put the address of the facility. When you put the number of attendees, it's either going to be you'll know the number because you did a video chat with them or you went to the window with them, or it's going to be an estimate to your best ability of how many people were impacted by your letters. So, I mean, if you think there's 80 people in that facility and you sent letters and the letters were for everybody to look at, you can put that number. And then the time is the time that you spent either on the letters, with, keeping in mind that there is a 2-hour limit for visits in the system. That will really come in with, window visiting, with the virtual visiting if you're doing it via Skype or however, but you'll put that time limit in as well. So yes, you can absolutely log your virtual visits.
Great, thank you. There's a question in here about animal to human, human to animal transmission. Those resources that Katie pointed out that you can find in your volunteer center with the big, it was like a pink flag where you can get to everything. We do address this a little bit, but ultimately the CDC said the risks are very, very low. And so that's kind of all we have to say about that. If it's that's not a risk you're willing to take, we understand that. But I do want to also remind you that there are other diseases out there, specifically I think of MRSA, that can be transmitted human to animal. So it's always been a risk for volunteers that can be greatly reduced by all the protocols we mentioned. So we're aware of it, but because the risk is so low, we're focusing much more on helping our handlers visit safely in human to human and the human to human end of that at this time. If things change, trust me, Pet Partners will be the first to sort of acknowledge it, read it, figure out how we feel about it as an organization. And then of course you all can do the same. Still so many questions. I'm so glad some of you are still hanging out because these are good questions. I'm going to stick around for another 5-7 minutes to answer these. So if you can hang with me, we'll get to a few more. So somebody asked about what is the document to provide to the facility before we visit. I'm actually going to scroll back here and show, shoot, sorry y'all, it's somewhere in here. Sorry, I just got to get this maximized here again for you so you can see it a little better. Goodness. I want to show you where it is. There we go. So when you log into your volunteer center account, when you say review Pet Partners latest guidance about COVID-19, there is a space there where you can download a document if you want to share it with facilities. It's a one-pager on Pet Partners infection prevention and control measures and how our handlers already do so much to prevent transmission of various diseases, viruses, so on and so forth. So that's where you would find it. I am happy. I'm going to make a note here since a couple people asked that one. I will also include a link to all of this in the follow-up email so that you have everything in one place. Hang with, there's a lot of long questions here. Katie, one more on logging a visit. If you could just touch briefly on why is it a good idea to log visits? What does it do for us as an organization? What does it do for the volunteer?
Brenda, you might also have some thoughts on this one, but yeah, so logging a visit is really important for a couple things. So for you as a volunteer, it helps you keep track so you can really see the impact that you're making. So you get to notate if you haven't logged a visit before, you get to notate where you visited at, how long you visited for, the number of people that you impacted, and then you can put notes about your visit, which is always nice to be able to go back and look at. For us, it's really helpful to see how many people are visiting. It helps with different funding things. Brenna, you might have more information if you want to talk about that aspect, but it's really helpful for us to get an idea of how active our volunteers are, where they're going. We get to see top facilities, so we get to see trends as well. So yeah, it's really beneficial for us to be able to have that. But Brenna, I don't know if you have more that you want to add about the financial aspect.
Sure, I can just briefly say, we get donations from individuals, from like corporate sponsors, and from foundations. And so it's really important for us to be able to convey the kind of impact that the money they donate gives. We also we get looked at every year by the Better Business Bureau and Charity Navigator, and those are just like kind of like some charity organizations that make sure that nonprofits are stewarding their funds correctly. So it's really helpful for us to convey impact that way and stay accountable to the general public.
Great, thank you. We had a couple questions about wiping down animals between interactions. That's certainly acceptable. Just make sure you're using a vet-approved product or an animal-safe product, and not like a Lysol wipe or anything like that. That wouldn't be safe for your animal. So just be mindful of that. We have some people here talking about the fact that they have suggested some of these alternative visits to their facilities and they haven't had much success. People just aren't interested. The person's located in Long Island, and I know, that general area was one of the earlier places. And so they're asking if we have a list of facilities that are requesting visits. You certainly can look on our website where we do, in the same volunteer center account you see on your screen, you're able, if you scroll to the bottom of your individualized page, it'll tell you who's looking for visits in your area. I will caution you, however, though, that a lot of those visit requests were placed in there before COVID. Nonetheless, I think they're a good place to start. And I would say if you still don't have any luck, and I know virtual visits aren't the same, but come to that Facebook page because it's facilities all over the country who want to pick up the content that our handlers are uploading. So you have the ability to reach lots of facilities and you're not limited to those in your own area. So I'll point that out. I just want to share from a volunteer about the fact that he's doing FaceTime visits with his dog. It sounds like they are virtually visiting a local nursing home. He wanted to give a tip to everyone saying that his wife stays off camera and gives Ella treats to keep her focused for her visits. She even has Ella nod yes or shake her head no when the residents or I ask her questions. So I think this is a really good example of the fact that whenever you do some of these alternative visits, you want to plan ahead on how you're going to make them work. It's not the same as showing up in person where, yes, preparation is needed, but you can kind of feel out the situation in person, feel out your animal. This is something where you need to be a little bit more prepared. That goes for virtual visits or for window visits, anything like that. We have 1 more minute, so I'm just going to scroll through. If we didn't get to your question, please use the Contact Us button. It appears at the bottom of every single page on our website. Katie's team is ready and able to answer any of your questions. We have time right now to do so. We can get on the phone and call you. So if you want to talk any of this out, we are happy to do so. The one I do want to address before we get off the call is, do you foresee evaluations coming back anytime soon? And the reason I want to hit that one is because I know that we do have some prospective volunteers on the call. And for evaluations, the approach is very similar in the sense that it's up to the team evaluator if they personally feel comfortable holding an evaluation given their geographic situation and so on and so forth that we talked about ad nauseum already. We do, since this is a Pet Partners event, we do require masks at those. So for visits, it's highly recommended, and in most cases, the facility is going to require you wear one anyway. But for our own events, including evaluations, masks are absolutely required. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of evaluations come online. I would say maybe 3 or 4 a week nationwide, whereas normally we might have 80 to 100 in a week nationwide. So they're going to slowly creep back on. But remember that all renewing teams don't have to evaluate anytime real soon. we're asking that those who are able to put on evaluations are evaluators. We're hoping that they can serve new teams with those as they feel comfortable, which is why no renewing team has to evaluate. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen. I do think we'll just slowly over time see more and more get added. But right now it's not a lot. And so I'm going to end there because it is 6 o'clock Central, which is where I live. I am going to take a note of the folks we didn't answer their questions. I'll try to do individual follow-up this week. If you don't hear from me, please, I urge you, get in touch with us. We want to help. We're ready to talk. And I think with that, I'll say goodbye. Katie and Brenna, do you have any final thoughts other than goodbye and thank you?
Nope. Yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.